Welcome everybody to the YouTube section of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys podcast, Neck Pour. Tonight we're going to be discussing the neck pour right there. We're going to give you all the different theories and everything about it and what Tiny thinks about it. I'm Tiny of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. Great to be here. Love, keep doing these podcasts and these, as Young knows, referred to these one-on-one podcasts as Tiny Talks. One of the things in the Tiny Talks we like to do is kind of make it kind of quick. And this is an effort to make, half hour, 45-minute podcast, maybe even a little bit less if possible, because tonight it deals with one subject, but there's always a lot of stuff to cover, like new members and that type of thing, and all the, readings of and sponsorships and everything like that. So we're going to get going tonight with the podcast. Not a lot of pre-content because I'm sitting here by myself. Remember, I am an executive bourbon steward trained by Moonshine University. So if anybody's ever interested in tasting, corporate tastings, anything like that, I have the ability to get bourbon. I have a lot of bourbon. You can leave it up to me. I can pick the bourbon. I bring it with me. We do the tastings. It's a per person charge. And I love tasting whiskey in groups, large groups, small groups, one-on-one. It's just something that as a bourbon steward, that's a lot of fun to do. I do a little bit of traveling. So if you're interested, we are the Scotchy Bourbon Boys at gmail.com. Email me. You could get a hold of me on Facebook Messenger, also under Jeffrey Mueller. And you can also message me in the group, the Facebook group, the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, also if you're at all interested. So with no further ado, we are going to start.
Dant Crossing, Gethsemane, Kentucky. Timeless hospitality that stirs the spirit. Dant Crossing is a one-of-a-kind destination for unforgettable weddings, memorable corporate events, day trips, and weekend getaways. The pastoral campus is anchored by Log Still Distillery and includes an amphitheater that seats 2,000, a 12-acre lake for fishing and unique lodging options, creating an immersive experience that's rooted in the community and culture of our little slice of Kentucky. More attractions will open soon at Dant Crossing, including our 21,000 square foot distillery, which we will have the ability to produce 15,000 barrels of spirit each year, a network of wooded walking trails, fully functional private train depot, farm-to-table restaurant, and the Legacy, a premier wedding and events venue. Whether you're looking to host an event, book a stay, or reserve a tasting, we're ready to welcome you. Learn more at dantcrossing.com.
Podcast.
Spirits of French Lick is proud to introduce the Maddie Gladden Bottled and Bond Bourbon. This 4-year aged bourbon is double pot distilled and non-chill filtered and has a full-bodied mouthfeel with eucalyptus, molasses, clove, ginger, and slight citrus as well as grains of paradise. The finish is long and reappearing on the back of the tongue with notes of pepper, tobacco leaf, and mint green. All of our spirits are available for tasting and purchase inside the French Lick Winery and Distillery. Spirits of French Lick. Respect the grain, please enjoy responsibly, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why, Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you, I tell you, I tell you we must die.
Welcome back to another exciting podcast of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. I am Tiny, taking it over tonight. I am by myself solo for a tiny talk. Our main topic tonight is going to be the neck pour. The neck pour. Got a little bit of theory. There's so many articles written that the neck pour isn't a thing. There's so many articles written that the neck pour is a thing. And tonight we are just going to dive into the neck pour and everything. What I personally have been doing to deal with what I very much believe in, and I believe it with 100% of my soul that the neck pour is a thing. But we are the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. Check us out, www.scotchybourbonboys.com. We are on the web. Our website is kind of a good place to go to find out all about us. There's bios on Xavier, myself, Tiny, Young Nose, Super Nash, Roxy. We're all there. What we like to drink, different drink mixes are on the website. Also, cool thing, links to this podcast. And then what else would you want on there but a shop where you can get these Scotchy Bourbon Boy Glencairns. They're available on the website. Just go there. You can also messenger me on Facebook, and I will also set you up if you really want one of these. We also have Scotchy Bourbon Boys t-shirts and Scotchy Bourbon balls that are handmade, ready for you to, what would you say, experience. I put in a little bit of a pause there to add a little bit of what tension, but the bourbon balls are pretty spectacular. But while you're there, if you check out the top right hand corner, there's two buttons up there. One's a YouTube button. It'll take you to our YouTube channel, but the other is a Patreon button. A very important button for us, because if you click that button and go to Patreon, there's a ton of stuff that you can get by subscribing and supporting us. The way Patreon works is it's a monthly subscription. We have anything from the $3 posting chip all the way up to signed prints of bourbon paintings by me. There's a whole bunch of different things, and one of the things that is going to be coming is that we are working on the Scotchy Bourbon Boys first ever barrel pick. I hope everybody out there, did you hear that? The Scotchy Bourbon Boys first ever barrel pick. It's going to be, we're going to try and do 3 barrel picks this year. We're working hard, working on the paperwork. Hopefully this will work out, and I'm looking forward, as the weather warms up, to be able to try and do our first. There will be many more details, and then there'll also be a Patreon barrel pick club that you'll be able to join to assure that you, when we do these barrel picks, either in some cases you can come along, and then other cases you make sure that every pick that we do, you get a bottle or 2, depending on what level you'll be for that. So with no further ado, let's talk about our new members. Let's let's see. I had it all set up and now it's gone. Let's just go right here. We got our newest members to the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. And there we go. Oh, it's buried way down there. Like, how come? So we would like to give a shout out, a great big Scotchy Bourbon Boy welcome to Michael Miller, Paul Gutierrez, Mike and Kiera Lawley, Moises Carniero, Wyatt Evans, Ricky Lee Campbell, Patrick Bologna, Jimmy Baker, David Mark Young, Carl J. Gamble, Adina Awalds, and Mark Burnett. Welcome to the group. I hope you have a great time. The group is that we do on Facebook. If you're part of our group, you get a ton of information. You get links to the podcast, to the YouTube. You get links to Michael Veach's YouTubes. You get links to his blog. You get links to Fred Minnick. You get links to pretty much anything to do with whiskey. It gets posted there. Plus, our members post lots of really cool bottles that they pick up, what they're drinking that night. So as part of a Scotchy Bourbon Boy, our Scotchy Bourbon Boy group, please, what we would like is for you to participate and give us what you're drinking. Let us know what you're thinking. We, as the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, are also a physical group. We meet anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks. We just had our February 4th meeting last Friday. We brought back one of our podcasting members who podcasts from South Carolina. He originally was here, was a major part of the podcast. Now he podcasts once a month that you can hear him. And then also he came back for the Scotchy Bourbon Boys meeting last Friday, and it was fantastic. We had the meeting at the Barrel Room in North Canton. The Barrel Room, Carrie Sullivan, she runs it, owns it, operates it, wonderful, and allows us to be there. And we tasted 3 Old Forester expressions. It was fantastic, reasonable. We get food trucks there sometime. You got to check it out. If you're in the Ohio area, we give at least 2 to sometimes 3-4 weeks in advance when this meeting. We make a Facebook event of it. We look to bring in people. People have come from all over the country to attend the meetings. But our last meeting, a shout out to everybody who was able to be there. We had a great time. So also, we are on Instagram, the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. We are on Twitter at Scotchy, the Scotchy Bourbon Boys. And then also we are on YouTube under the Scotchy Bourbon Boys, LinkedIn under my Jeffrey Mueller. And then also, I believe, Facebook, Twitter, I'm missing one, but we're also on all the major podcast formats. If you could get us on Alexa, you can get us on Google, you could get us on Apple, iHeart, Spotify. Check us out, but no matter what format you're listening to us on, please subscribe to us, like us, and leave feedback. Any bit of feedback, good feedback is always welcome. So that brings us to where we got through the hard part there. Tonight we will be drinking in the Scotchy Bourbon Boys Glencairn. This Glencairn, Martin Duffy, who is a Scotchy Bourbon Boy, is the North American Glencairn Crystal Glass representative and he's the one. Wow, let's try that again. The North American Glencairn Crystal Glass representative, and he's the one who hooked us up with these awesome Scotchy Bourbon Boy Glencairns. You can see, I'm going to put that, turn my up. You can see that etched right in there. we're able to have that. They're for sale and everything, like we said. But if it wasn't for Martin taking my hand and working me through it, this never would have happened. It's a great Glencairn, and we pretty much are drinking out of these all the time and always have a back stock for sale. Now, that brings us to what this subject is. Once again, the neck pour. There's tons of articles on the neck pour, and tonight the neck pour is going to be courteous of Yellowstone limestone branch from their hand-picked collection. Let's throw on the glasses so I can give you exactly what this is. This is Bosley from their gift shop. The way they do this is they name it after their dogs that are at when you visit the Log Still distillery, they have dogs. They've had dogs lined up, different dogs throughout. And this one is named after Bosley. This is single barrel number 7544569. It was barreled 11/15/16, and this one is President and Distiller. It's signed by Stephen Bean, and it's 115 proof, 57.5. And this Bosley was handpicked for the gift shop at Limestone Distillery. Now, I haven't opened it. That means we are going to be doing a neck pour with it. Now, everybody wants to know, for the people who don't know what a neck pour is. So the neck pour is, and the theory behind it is that there's air in the bottle, and there's a certain amount of whiskey that at the front is being exposed to the air that's in the bottle. Now, what I feel, we'll get into that more, so that when you pour it initially, the neck pour is, because it's been exposed to the air, and then you have all the bourbon below it, that initial whiskey doesn't taste as good. The flavor somehow, based off of being up there in the neck pour, is, now there would be a simple, I've never heard this, but there's a simple answer to the neck pour. So you've had this bottle, it's been sitting like this and like that, but watch this. Let's mix up, flip it up and down a couple times, and now all that bourbon that was sitting at the top is mixed into the rest of the bourbon, which should help you out on a neck pour. Now, we just did a podcast with Trip Whitbeck, and he sent us a bottle of rye bourbon. And we opened it the night before because we really wanted to have our ducks in a row with Trip, having Trip on, to give him an honest opinion of his bourbon. And when we opened up that neck pour that first night, the nose was similarly not great. There was some flavors in it, but it was very muted. And then the taste was okay bourbon, but it wasn't super bourbon. So the next day, when we started tasting it and putting it through its rigors, it was better, way better, actually. And then by the nighttime, when we had Trip on, it had become, when you opened up the bottle, the flavor, you could smell it from 2-3 feet away. You could just smell the nose, which when you first opened it up, it was hard to get a nose off of it. So some people say that a neck pour is bad because it's the first bourbon or whiskey of the day and your palate's getting shocked and everything like that. But I find, and this is a thing, where the neck pour seems to always be more spicy. There's more ethanol. There's more bitterness. There's more oakiness. And the first time that this ever happened to me, and I had no idea because it was early on and I had never even heard of what a neck pour, okay? So when you never heard of a neck pour and you don't know what it's talking about, we had gotten a bottle of larceny. I had picked up a bottle of larceny. And when we picked that bottle up, I picked that bottle up, just picked it off, this 92 proof. It's a weeder, and it drank hot and ethanol, and I didn't like it, and it was not good. And I basically put it back on the shelf and didn't revisit it for 9 months. But when I revisited it, I was basically updating my whiskey log that I had gotten as an app on my phone, and I was taking pictures of the bottles in nice settings, and then I was rating them in the app. So I went back to that larceny barrel, not barrel proof, but just the regular larceny. And when I drank it 9 months later, it was fantastic. Lots of cinnamon, lots of caramel. The spice was down. It wasn't anything that I remembered. And I asked a couple distillers that I had met in that 9 months about it, and they talked about the oxidizing. They talked about it oxidizing. And I've since then experienced this many different times. Okay. Many different times. And what's very unique about this is that what I found, if it's a really, really, really good bourbon, such as an Old Carter, or let's say a Weller full proof, or a Pappy, this doesn't seem to, the longer they sit, they seem to still be good. They start off great and they don't lose anything, but they don't have that neck pour connotation. Whereas other bourbons like Old Forester, 1920, definitely had a neck pour kind of, thing, and it got better as it sat. So what I thought of forever is that when you get a bourbon and you buy it, you should just bring it home and open it. Just pop it open. Don't drink it. Just pop it open. Give it a whiff. Now see, very strong ethanol. That's the neck pour. Now some people say 5 minutes, and that's gonna, the ethanol that was in the bottle evaporates, gives it time. Now we did shake it up on this one. Now, like I said, this is 115 proof, coming from the Limestone Branch Distillery. All right, you could hear, I've got it. Now, I have a theory on neck pours. Now, all that, they fill that bottle up. And one of the things that happens when, this is a dark brown. This is almost a dark beer. The color on this is amazing. Brown sugar, apples, some cinnamon. But this nose is very running together. Apple pie. It's a nice nose, but it's running together. Now, I got some notes here. When you're distilling, you have the heads, you've got the hearts, and you've got the tails. What does that mean? When you start a run, there's the beginning of the run. When you start to get your first, once you start to, you get that still hot enough, everything starts to evaporate, going through the different chambers, and then being condensed back into the liquid, and then heated up again and back. And once it gets to the point where it gets to come out the still, and it's that liquid, the first part of that, when you start to evaporate, the alcohol has a lot of chemicals in it that aren't very good for you in the heads. Those chemicals are acetone, acetylide, acetylide, and acetate. Those aren't acetylide, and then acetate, acetone. Acetone's like nail polish. And so these alcohols, some of these alcohols that exist are part of when you basically distill jet fuel. And that's part of the same process of where they're taking the jet fuel and what they're trying to make are based off this. But when you're making something to drink, you gotta let those the start of that with all those chemicals, the acetone, the acetylide, and the acetate, you gotta let that run off. And there's a point where it starts and the run's going, and they call it the heads. That is the drinkable liquid. But between the tails and the heads, some of these chemicals can get into the distillate. And then when you get to the tails, you have propanol, butanol, and fusel oil, and I want to say an array of different alcohols. So once you're done with the hearts, you get the heads, and that's the finish of it. So you're pulling the middle of the run out of there. And what happens is the first run goes through, and you do that, and you pull those out, and some of the chemicals got in, so you'll do a second run. So you got your low wine initially, and then when you do the second run, you get your high wine, which then again removes some more of these chemicals. Now, when you're doing a pot still, you have a little bit more of it there right in front of you. It's running off, and how it's running off. And the pot still is just one heated process. It comes out, it starts, whatever. And it's not a continuous process. When it's done, you have to clean out the still and get ready for your next run. But column still is constant. It's constantly running. It starts to finish. But as you're adding in the beer, the distiller's beer, that has more hearts, tails, and tails, hearts, and heads again, and not as many. When you're column distilling, there's some that get in there. Now, when you age in the barrel, once you put that into the barrel, those chemicals, like what's in the tails and heart and tails and heads, I said it right first. The barrel will, in that charcoal filter, will remove those chemicals out. So then when it's longing back and forth in the barrel, it's even getting filtered further down the line. But there's some that get in. I mean, that's the way it is. And my opinion of what a neck pour is that those acetates, acetones, the propanol, the butanol, they're an alcohol that while it's the bottle, they release from the whiskey and go into the neck. So you have this ethanol, this extra air that's filled with these chemicals hitting that whiskey right there. So if you don't shake up your bottle, those chemicals are just sitting there. So when you open it up, they release, and regular air goes back in. But that first neck pour is what you always have. You get a little bit more of an ethanol. You get a little bit more of those acetones and acetaldehyde. I don't know why I wrote this by myself, but acetylide. And it's just like every distiller on the planet's going to kill me on this one, but I'm not even going to say that anymore. I had it before and it's just not going, it's not working. But then the acetates, along with the propanol and butanol, they release. And so, but they're still sitting on the top of that first pour. So then once you've released it, you replace it with fresh air. And now the rest of that can come out, and it's not built up. And especially if you're going to, excuse me, do that neck pour, there's even more room for those to get out and the whiskey to breathe, to oxidate further in the bottle. Now, like I said, I open this bottle. I'm gonna take a sip. Sweet, like biting in this one. It's like biting into a red apple. Sweet, but I get a certain amount, and I get a little bit of yeast, like a bready flavor with that. That's pretty delicious right there. But it's got a burn, and it seems to have what a neck pour. It's like a bitter extra added in to the whiskey, like something that's not normally there. I find that Brown-Forman Old Forester, always when I open that bottle initially, I can taste that. So as I taste more and more, when I get that neck pour, it's a chemical taste to it that I recognize. Now, I did shake this up, so I probably, that would be an answer. Like I said, if you're not trying to get a neck pour when you open up, shake up your bottle. I mean, tilt it up and down, let that air, let it mix back in, or whatever was sitting on the surface that was going to go into your glass as a neck pour is no longer, it's mixed in to the rest of the bourbon. Let it come out as it ages till the next time that you drink this bottle. So there's a lot of people that are experts and just say there's no such thing as a neck pour. But my opinion is that everybody's palates are different, as we all know. And we know that women, there's a lot more women that are super tasters than there are men. And there's a lot of men who are not super tasters, but that palate of that neck pour, in my opinion, now the way I've gotten around it, and it really kind of sucks around the holidays, because in the past, it's kind of like, I get so much bourbon, people send me bottles to taste on the podcast. People give me bottles to have whole podcast structures. I purchase my own bourbon for podcasts. And with that said, I have so much that I usually have a bottle or two or 10, maybe even sometimes 15, 20 bottles unopened. And that I haven't even thought of. I picked it up in Kentucky, and if you don't open it, it's not aging. It's just sitting there waiting to be opened, as if it's still sitting in the store, whatnot. But what I've been doing lately is when I get home, I pretty much open everything. But like I said, around the holidays, I usually can grab a bottle and get one. I can get a bottle and give that out to, friends, a full bottle, because I've got bottles. And this holiday season, there was a lot less bottles that were not open. And I basically ended up going out to in the last couple months, searching for specific bourbons for people I spend a lot of times in the whiskey lines, which I love to do because that is a place where we get more and more Scotchy Bourbon Boy listeners from those lines. Shout out to all my friends on Saturday morning at Giant Eagle Washington Square. That's a good time when we're all waiting for those bottles. Now, so that brings it's just so that's two ways to get around that neck pour. One, shake it up. Two, open it up and wait a day or two. That bourbon was definitely, by the day and a half later or a full day later, was the neck pour was gone. The bourbon had opened up and was fantastic. And what can I say? Whereas I've had it where I've let them sit for 8-9 months and the bourbon's just completely changed from that first pour to the, that neck pour all the way to that 8 months. So that oxidizing aspect, when you talk to the distillers, that is one thing. Now there's air in this bottle. It's going to oxidize. Some people, I think it makes the most bottles taste better. It opens them up, more caramel, more vanilla. You've got it less that ethanol-y, alcohol kind of thing that comes off of it is gone completely. So let's take this. Now this has been sitting in my glass for a couple minutes. And once again, that can be removed. So a lot of people like to let it sit once it's in the glass. That red apple, really sweet. There's vanilla, honey, and red apple on this one. For 115 proof, it's drinking really smooth. That chemical flavor that I just said that we were talking about, that can be in there, that I was tasting, is now 3/4 gone. It's barely there. Still there, but it's barely there. So once again, that's what that's what a neck pour is. It's all that built up chemicals going into the top of the bottle, sitting on top of that air is sitting on top of that particular whiskey at the top. Now, once again, I never thought of it until just now on the podcast. Shake the bottle up. That's going to eliminate the whiskey from it's going to mix up whatever was sitting on top, and it's going to mix it up back into the whiskey. Then once it's open and you've aerated it and let all that out, now you've got fresh air in there, and whatever's going in is gonna, and it's not that much. I don't think it's that much. That's why when you have that neck pour, the air pretty much, when it escapes, that's most of, it's been sitting on the shelf or whatever for a while, or on your shelf, and most of that has escaped into that air around there. So when you open it up, that's being released, but you still have the stuff that's sitting on the top. All right, so that is tonight's podcast. Now, we do a whiskey live coming up this Friday, which would be, let's see, tonight's Monday the 7th, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday the 11th. So 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friday, February 11th. Whiskey Live is going to be tasting Wilderness Trail. That is the Scotchy Bourbon Boys get together live on a Friday night, 9 p.m. We go live on Zavvi, YouTube, Facebook. Check us out. Taste along. Comment. We are tasting Wilderness Trail 6-year wheat bourbon, bottled in bonds. So it's 100 proof. We are looking forward to this. Dr. Patrick Heist and Shane Baker are the people over at Wilderness Trail doing a fantastic job. We are going to give this Wilderness Trail, the way it works is we have up to 4 to 5, sometimes 6 people. We all taste, rate, and once we're finished, we add up our scores. It's 25 for nose, 25 for taste, 25 for body, 25 for finish, a total of 100. We add up everybody's score, divide how many it is, and we come up with a rating for that particular bourbon. So get excited for Friday night, folks. We will be live on Whiskey Live also, the next podcast. I've got a special guest, Royce Neely. Listen for that. And our last podcast, we had Trip Whitbeck, as I mentioned before. Check that out. That was awesome. He is eyed bourbon, and he gave a really good insight of how someone can start up a blending, a bourbon that is blended. And then instead of sold by batch, is shot to basically make consistent batches that taste the same, opposed to each individual batch being separate of each other. So check that one out. All right. I'm www.scotchybourbonboys.com. Check us out. See if you can support us on Patreon. We're on all major podcast formats. Remember to like us, leave feedback, just support us. We appreciate it. And remember, everybody, good bourbon equals good friends and good times. Good night.
Oh, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. Show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Oh, don't ask why. For if we don't find the next whiskey bar, I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die. I tell you we must die.
All right. That was the end of tonight's podcast of the Scotchy Bourbon Boys neck pour. It's definitely, for me, real. You people out on YouTube, fantastic. This particular Yellowstone is delicious. For some reason, I always find that your palate goes through some different stages. I had a stage where I was getting a lot of chocolate, leading right up before the holidays, before I was taken down by the dreaded COVID-19 for a month. But everything's back. But right now, I'm getting a lot of it's a lot of maple on my palate that I'm picking up. I'm picking up a lot of syrup, and I'm also picking up like French toast or pancakes, that kind of thing a lot lately when I'm drinking. So my palate's going through that stage. If anybody who drinks a lot, tastes a lot, understands that that your palate goes through stages where you can taste different things. I still can taste chocolates, and once you've had that, you know what the chocolates taste like, and you know in oak and everything. So you've put that into your repertoire, but you never had tasted the French toast, and all of a sudden you're picking that up in a bunch of different bourbons, and it's kind of a cool thing, because who doesn't like French toast with maple syrup? I mean, come on. So anyways, cheers everybody on YouTube. I'm going to call this a night. Remember, once again, good bourbon equals good friends, and get the hell out there and live dangerously. Live your life. Good night.
The Watershed Story. A watershed moment might be pivotal, but it might also be quiet and fleeting. It could be a monumentous occasion, a cause for celebration, an enormous triumph, or a small daily victory. A watershed moment could be a rekindling or an observation or a gathering. Any opportunity to relish with friends and family. It's whatever you choose to cheers to, who you're gathered around, and whatever's worth celebrating. We founded Watershed Distillery on the principles of community in 2010. We wanted to live in, work in, and contribute to the community in which we grew up. We aimed to create spirits and stood apart in quality and character. Along the way, we set out to form a community of our own, one that could gather together to savor, celebrate, and enjoy good spirits and company. We've grown from a tiny little still and 2 guys in jumpsuits to a dedicated team of over 40 people and 2 much larger stills. If you're ever in the area, stop by so we can introduce you to our team and pour you some of our award-winning bourbon. Creating it was our watershed moment, but we want to hear about yours.